Okay, let's talk about square numbers and square roots. So, you should all know what squares are. For those of you who don't, here's what a square is. I'm going to draw one. Um, it's approximately like that. The key things about squares is that they have 4 right angle corners, like so, and that all 4 sides are the same length. So let's say I called this one 3. That means 3, 3, 3. That's what makes a square. So you've got 2 things. One, all sides are equal. And number 2, all angles are 90 degrees. Right, so that's the highlight of a square. So that's the shape square, but how does a number become a square? Right. Well, the number becomes a square based on something that we can do with the actual shape. So let's ask this question. I have this square. All the sides are 3. How do I find the area? So you should know that the area of a rectangle is length times width. A square is basically just a special rectangle where the length and width are the same. So for squares, your area is going to be your side times your side, because since all your sides are the same, it doesn't make any sense to call some of them width and some of them length. We'll just call them all sides. Okay? So side times side gives you your area. So in this case, your area is equal to 3 times 3, which is 9. So this is where the special part comes in. 9 is what we call a square number. Why do we call it a square number? Well, a square number is the result of a number multiplied by itself. By itself. Okay. So a number times itself gives you a square number. It also represents something else. It represents the area of a square. Okay. So the square number represents an area. It represents what you get when you take a number, which is a side length, times by itself. So that's what a square number is. Now there's 2 words that you're going to see in this course, which is square numbers. They're not words, sorry, phrases. Square numbers, okay, and perfect squares. You're going to see both of these show up. There are slight differences between the two, but we're not really concerned about them in this course. So you could just say they're the same. Okay? For the purpose of this course, a square number and a perfect square are exactly the same. We don't have to worry about it. Later on in your math careers, they will be different. But for now, we only care that they're the same. So if you see square numbers, it's the same thing as perfect squares, vice versa. All right. So now that's the square number part. What is a square root? Well, a square root, we're going to change the color here. Let's change it to, say, red. A square root is essentially the opposite of a square number. So the square root represents the side lengths of a square. Okay, so how do we find the side lengths if you have sorry, how do you find the side length if you already have the area? Well, so how do you find the square root? The square root is the number that you need to multiply by itself to get the result. Okay. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but I'll do some example questions and you'll see how that makes sense. Right. So let's do the example. So that's a square number, that's a square root. So let's do some example questions. Let's turn this to blue. So let's say I want to find the square of 5. So what this means when I say find the square of 5 is I want you to take 5 and I want you to draw a square with a side length of 5. So I'm going to do that. Here's my square. My side lengths are 5. My area is equal to 5 times 5, which is equal to 25. Okay. So there is my square of 5 right there. To write it mathematically, what you would write is this. To find the square, you would write it like that. 5 with a little 2 on the top. This little 2 up here, that, oh, let me erase that. This 2 up top represents square in math. So if you want to find the square of 5, you say 5, and I want to find the square of it. What does this represent? Well, it represents the area, which is 5 times 5, which is 25. Okay. So that's how we find the square of 5. Let's say I have a different number. Let's call this number 1. Let's say I have a number 2, and it says evaluate 7 with a 2 up top. Okay. So when the question says evaluate, it always means just go find out what number that is. Okay. Because that's not exactly just a number, you have to do a little bit of work with it. So go do that work and find out what that number is. Well, 7 squared like this. This 2 means you have to times 7 by itself, like that. So 7 times 7 is 49. If you can't do that in your head, please consult your multiplication table. You can use it. So nothing special is really happening right now, right? You're just kind of multiplying numbers by itself. Easy peasy stuff. So what if I start throwing in square roots? So let's do this. Find the square root of 16. Okay, what does that mean? Okay. So remember that the square root represents the side length of a square. Well, the 16 here would represent the area of that square. So let's draw a square. So here's my square. The area is equal to 16. And I need to find how long the sides are. How do I do that? Well, I know that I can do the side times the side to get the area. Well, area is 16. I don't know what the sides are. I just know it's a number, and that these two numbers have to be the same. So what I would now do is consult my multiplication table, go find 16, and see if I can get two of the same numbers to multiply to get 16. Well, if you look at it, you can get something like 2 and 8, but you don't want two different numbers. You want two of the same numbers. If you do that, you'll realize the only options you have is 4 times 4, which means the side length here has to be 4. So what's the square root of 16? The answer is 4. Put that in the box so I know it's the answer. Let's do that. Let's put all the answers in a box so I know that this is the answer. Okay, how do I show this mathematically? Well, there's one way to show it, right here where I drew the diagram. There's another way to show it, like this, using the square root symbol. So this little kind of, it almost looks like a division, but it's got like a little check to start. That is a square root symbol. And what you do is you put the number you want to square root in there. Okay. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4. Well, how do I know that? Here's how you know that. If I ask you, say, the square root of 16 is equal to something, what you're thinking is blank times blank is equal to 16. Well, what is that? That's 4 times 4. So the answer is equal to 4. Let's do one last question here. Question 4. Okay. Evaluate 121, like that. And you say, okay, well, I know what this symbol means. That symbol means square root. I have a square with area 121. I'm not going to draw it for this one because I want to evaluate this. I want to just use numbers. So here's my thinking process. I'm looking at the square root of 121. And I'm saying, okay, this is going to equal some number here. I don't know what it is, but I do know that some number times itself has to give me 121. So what is that number? Well, if I check my multiplication tables, I find that 11 times 11 is equal to 121. So that means my answer is 11. I'm going to put it in a box like that. And that's it. Hope this was helpful. Enjoy your work.